Okay. So we began last week discussing waiting after a meat meal till you could eat milchiks. And we started with a Gemara in Chulin, and the Gemara in Chulin tells us that you have to wait after you eat a meat meal, miseuda leseuda. Before you eat a milchik meal, after the fleshik meal, you have to wait from one suda to another suda. Now, what does that mean? So just to give you the sum of what we did last week, we have one opinion that says you just have to end the meat meal, terminate it, and then you begin immediately after that your milchik meal. That's one view. And what that would mean is that you bench, and in those days, each person had his own little table. That's how they ate in those days. So he has to remove the table on which he ate meat and bring out a new table and start a new su'uda. But there's no need to wait any period of time. On the other extreme, we had another opinion that said you have to wait a full 6 hours, because in those days, from one meal to the other, let's say from breakfast till let's say dinner or supper or lunch or whatever it might be, they used to wait about 6 hours. And then in between these two extremes, we have one opinion, which is called Rabbeinu Tam, and he says you don't even have to end your meal. You could immediately start your milchik meal after your fleshik meal on the following two conditions. Number one, you have to wash out your mouth. And number two, you have to rinse your hands. To wash out your mouth to make sure that there's no meat in your mouth, and rinse your hands off to make sure there's no fatty substance from the meat that you were eating on your hands. And then immediately you can start eating a milchik meal. Then we have another opinion that says you have to wait an hour. 1 hour after your meat meal before you start your milk meal. And finally, we have another opinion that says wait 3 hours. You may know that the German Jews have the minhag of waiting 3 hours. The Dutch Jews, on the other hand, will wait only 1 hour.
I have a question.
Please.
What you're saying is a meal. So would it be like if you just wanted to have a milk cookie, it would have been okay? Or it's only if you're having a meal?
Once you had a meal, and in that meal you had meat, then you can't eat a cookie that's milk. Why? Because if you would eat a cookie that's...
Just said that you could have a meal, a milchik meal.
Okay, if I said a milchik meal, I meant to say a full meal of milchiks, but the same law would apply if you want to eat a piece of cheese or a piece of cookie that's milchik. You can't integrate that into a meal in which you ate fleshik. So once you eat a meal of fleshiks, you cannot eat milchiks. Until when? Forever and ever? So those are the 4 opinions that we mentioned.
I have another question. Sorry. Is there a differential between chicken and meat with these rebellions?
Excellent. That's a fascinating question. See, on a biblical level, according to the law of the Torah, chicken is not considered meat. You need what's called basar behema, what we would call beef. But the Rabbanon expanded the law of the Torah to include even chicken. And therefore, we don't eat milk and chicken in the same meal. But we will see, maybe tonight or maybe another night if you come again, that we are a little bit more lenient when it comes to fowl, when it comes to poultry or chicken. And that is because the Torah did not prohibit. Again, this is Rabbi Yossi Aglili. You have different opinions, but we have accepted the view that the Torah itself did not prohibit chicken with milk. On the Torah level, you can have, we'll call it a chicken burger with cheese. A cheese chicken burger would be perfectly permissible according to Torah law. Okay. So again, just to summarize, we have one view that says you've got to end one Suda in which you ate meat in order to start a meal or a cookie that has milchiks in it. How do you terminate the first meal that you ate meat in? You have to bench, you have to remove the table. According to second opinion, you don't even have to do that. All you have to do is clean your hands and rinse out your mouth. According to a third opinion, you have to wait an hour. According to another opinion, you wait 3 hours, and finally 6 hours.
So what's the lenient one on chicken? What is
We didn't get to that yet. So, I'm going to have to try to build up to that. Okay, then?
To wait 5 hours.
Right. Now, in the 6 hour realm, we have other leniencies. We have one opinion that says into the 6th hour. That means 5 hours and 1 minute. Then we have a third opinion that says it's got to be the majority of the 5th hour. So you have to wait 5.5 hours plus another minute. So there are all sorts of variations and all sorts of traditions. What do we have here on page 136? Here, we have a discussion about the following issue. He says that in the name, you don't have to follow the text inside unless you want to, but I'm going to sort of summarize it. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is of the opinion that he should always wait 6 hours, even if he comes from a German background and his parents only waited 3 hours. Reb Shlomo Zalman accepts the view of 6 hours, even for such a person. And that's a pretty radical statement, because usually we tell a person to continue following in the tradition of his parents, of his family, his upbringing. But here Reb Shlomo Zalman feels that the halacha has been accepted to wait 6 hours, and therefore you should change your minhag in favor of 6 hours. That's number 31 you'll see on your page. Okay, I'm just showing you where it is. Now we're going to move over right now to study the bottom of page 137. So we're really fast forwarding, and that is Tam Hamtana Bein Basar L'Chol. What is the reason we would wait 6 hours and not eat meat and milk together and separate them by 6 hours? So we have here on page 138 the Rambam. And the Rambam's opinion is that when you eat meat, what happens is that particles of meat get stuck between your teeth, and therefore you have to wait until that meat is gone. Now, what does that mean, until it's gone? Theoretically, it could be there for 24 hours. I don't know, 36 hours, who knows how long, depending how good you are at brushing your teeth or picking your teeth. But the halacha set up a standard of 6 hours. After 6 hours, that meat that's still stuck between your teeth is not reckoned with. It's not considered basar. That's the opinion of the Rambam. Rashi has a totally different understanding. Rashi holds that there's some sort of taste of meat that comes up, so to speak, from your belly, even after you've finished eating the meat. That's called shuman oleh. And what that means is you have to wait 6 hours until you know that the meat is completely digested and it's no longer being mala shuman. It's no longer giving you a taste of meat in your mouth. Now, what's the difference between the Rambam and Rashi? What happens if you have a young child and you want to chew the meat and spit it out so that the child can eat the meat after you've chewed it up? According to the Rambam, you have a serious problem. Why? Because you have meat particles trapped between your teeth. According to Rashi's sheet, on the other hand, since the meat was not swallowed and it didn't go down to your stomach, it's not going to be mala shuman. It's not going to create a taste in your mouth of meat because you spit it out.
And batel has nothing to do with that.
No, batel only applies when you have a mixture of meat and milk. We're talking about a case where there's no mixture of meat and milk. You've eaten meat and now you want to eat milk. You want to eat a piece of cheese. Let's take another case. What would be in the following case? You have a tavshil shel basar. What's a tavshil shel basar? Let's say you cook pasta together with gravy, meat gravy. Do you have to wait 6 hours?
I think so.
According to the Rambam, you don't. Why? Because according to the Rambam, the liquid gravy never gets stuck between your teeth. And the Rambam is of the opinion that the reason why we wait 6 hours is to eradicate the basar bein hashinayim. There is no basar bein hashinayim. But if you go with Rashi, and Rashi says that when you swallow something meaty, there's like a fatty taste in your mouth for 6 hours, then in this case, you're going to have to wait 6 hours. What would Rashi say about the case where he chews it and then spits it out for his child? You don't have to wait 6 hours. The Rambam, in the case where he chews it up and you have meat between your teeth, is going to force you to wait 6 hours. But the Rambam, in the case where you swallowed meat, but it was a liquid kind of a rotev, a gravy inside pasta or whatever it might be, then you don't have to wait 6 hours. But Rashi would say you have to wait 6 hours because the fatty meat substance went down to your stomach. How do we paskin? So about 200 years ago, there was a great posek called the Pri Megadim, and he paskins that we have to go lechumra according to both opinions. We got to satisfy both the Rambam and Rashi. That means the following: that in both these cases, you're going to have to wait 6 hours. Case number one, where you chewed the meat and spit it out and didn't swallow it. Case number two, where you swallowed it, but it's not stuck between your teeth. However, what about the following case? Let's say you have a tavshil of pasta with gravy, and you chew the pasta with gravy and spit it out. Let's say you have a child, and the child is going to, very young infant, the child is going to have trouble eating pasta, straight pasta, it's too large. So you chew it up, it's got gravy in it, meat gravy, and then you spit it out. Do you have to wait 6 hours?
Well, as far as I know, pasta gets stuck in your teeth.
But the pasta is parva.
It was mixed with the flesh.
Yeah.
It went into
But
the
the
noodles.
meat,
It was soaked into the noodles.
Correct, but listen carefully. The Rambam says that if you don't chew it up, right? And now what are you chewing? You're chewing the pasta, but you're not. Let's say, for example, you have a soup. Okay, let's say you have a meat soup. What do they call a meat soup?
Could be anything.
We'll call it meat soup for the
Yeah.
time being, okay, just to get by. So the Rambam would say you don't have to wait 6 hours. Why? Because there's no basar bein hashinayim. All you have is liquids. Liquids don't get stuck between your teeth. There's no need to wait 6 hours. What's going to be the problem? The problem is Rashi sheet, because Rashi says that since you swallowed it, it went inside your stomach, it's going to be malas shuman. But what happens if I take soup in my mouth, fleishiger soup, and I spit it out? I never swallowed it. There's no basar bein hashinayim. I don't have to wait 6 hours. Both according to Rashi and according to the Rambam. Why? Again, let me go over it one more time. You did not swallow something that has a meat substance in it, but it's not something that creates meat between your teeth. There's no basar bein hashinayim.
So wait a minute, it's only if you take one spoonful, or if you have a whole bowl of.
Again, did you swallow it? If you swallowed it, then Rashi says it goes down to your stomach and it brings the taste of meat forward. You have to wait 6 hours because of Rashi. But let's say you spit it out. In the case where you chewed up solid meat and then you spit it out, the Rambam is going to require you to wait 6 hours, even though it didn't go down to your stomach and it's not malas shuman, but you've got basar bein hashinayim, you've got particles of meat between the teeth. But now we're talking about a case where you didn't swallow it. So according to Rashi, it's not mala basar. And on the other hand, it wasn't something that you chewed up that created particles of meat between your teeth. Like a soup, the example I gave.
The bottom line is, all these things, we have to wait 6 hours. Because that's the summary, right?
No,
No,
I'm going to
no.
disagree with you.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you that if you spit something out and it had fleishiks in it, I'm not sure that you have to wait 6 hours.
Well, let me
You
tell
have to convince me that you swallowed it and it's got meat between the teeth, or at least one of those two. But let's say it doesn't have not one nor two. I could, the 2 boxes, instead of checking one of the 2 boxes, I can X both boxes. A, I didn't swallow it, and B, I didn't chew it. I don't have it between my teeth. In such a case, I would not have to wait, and I can eat milk
putting
immediately
You're
afterwards.
telling me you're putting meat in your mouth and you didn't chew it.
Right.
So why did you put it in your mouth?
Let's say, for example, you wanted to taste it. You're a chef, let's say, right? So a chef wants to make sure, I'm just giving you an example. A chef wants to make sure that, it's got the right proportions and the right taste. So he takes things in his mouth and he decides.
You end up swallowing in some form. There's no way you could do that without swallowing something that's on your tongue.
Okay.
Can I tell you something? The reason why I know what I'm talking about is because I can't eat meat. I had certain issues with my
gastro, whatever.
And I eat meat and I spit it out. I take a tissue and nobody sees it and I spit it out because I like the thing of it.
But you chew the meat?
What?
You chew the meat?
I chew the meat.
So then the Rambam says you have to wait 6 hours. Yeah, but I'm talking about a case where you don't have pieces of meat caught between the teeth. You didn't chew it. It was kind of like a liquidy kind of substance.
You can swallow it. There's no way you don't swallow a little.
Is that what you do? You swallow it? I'm going to tell you, physician, that you swallowed it. You're going to be in deep trouble.
You take some meat that has some gravy in it, put it in your mouth, and spit it out, and tell me if you swallowed nothing in it. I will tell you that I don't believe you can do it.
Okay. All right.
All right. So we have
All right. Now I want to go on to the following issue. And this is on page 139. We're talking about raising children. In halacha, that's called chinuch. And the issue is, what do I have to be careful about in terms of my children's eating? Like, say, for example, there's ice cream. And the ice cream has what we call cholav akum. Let's say for those who are very careful not to eat cholav akum. Do I have to train my child and make sure that the child doesn't eat that ice cream? So we have a principle that you can't feed non-kosher food to a child. That's called lispos la biyadayim. You're not allowed to do that. But what happens if the prohibition is only d'Rabbanan? It's only rabbinic. Like you mentioned before about chicken with milk, which is only d'Rabbanan. Now we have another question, just to pile up my questions here. Do I have to demand of my child that he or she should not eat milchiks after fleishiks? Now, when it comes to chinuch, there are different ages of a child. There's an infant, which is called a katan shebektanim, let's say up to the age of 3 or 4 or 5. Again, we'll talk about that. And then there's a child who understands that we don't mix meat and milk. A 5-year-old would probably understand the difference between meat and milk, if you follow what I mean. And then we have a 9-year-old. A 9-year-old already has to be trained. And then we have an 11 in the case of a girl, or a 12-year-old in the case of a boy. Do you see where I'm dividing up the ages? And now we talk about the question of a child who ate a meat meal. Let's say, for example, here in Israel and certainly in Europe, it's quite common that we eat the meat meal for the main meal in the afternoon, okay? Or let's say I send my child to school with a lunchbox. And in the lunchbox is a fleishika sandwich. You with me? So the child eats meat, let's say at 12 noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Comes home, child could be awake until 6 or 7, and now I want to feed my child a milchika meal. My child is hungry. But 6 hours did not pass by. Or a different case, let's say a child ate meat, and now the child says, Abba, I'm hungry, I want to have chavita. I want to have a, what's it called? An egg omelet, a cheese omelet that has cheese in it. How far do I have to go in terms of chinuch? Do I have to guarantee that my child waits 6 hours? So we start with the first tshuva, which is here on page 139. It's number 46. And it's the shut of the Shevet HaLev. He died very recently. His name was Rav Vosner. And he says the following. If you have a very young child as long as the child has a need to eat, feed him milchiks, meaning he ate fleishiks, feed him milchiks, no problem. And he has a proof, because the halacha is that, we don't tell a guy to do malacha from us on Shabbos. That's called Amir L'Nachri. But the Ramah writes, for the sake of a child, we're allowed to ask the guy to cook something. Why? Says the Ramah, because a child is a chole. Chole means that he has a certain halachic profile, a category in which we could be lenient for a chole. In fact, even for an adult who's sick, who's ill, I'm not talking about deathly ill, that's a chole sheish bo sakana. For that, even a Jew could cook for him on Shabbos. But we're talking about a chole she'ein bo sakana. He's not in a life-threatening situation, and we're allowed to tell a guy to cook for a chole on Shabbos. Again, there are many, many different nuances and conditions. I just want you to get the principle. What is the major principle here? That a katan is considered a chole. Do you hear this? The child is perfectly healthy, but he has nothing to eat right now. He wants to eat. He's considered a chole. He means he or she.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how I did it with my children. Once they were about 3 years old, I never, ever gave them meat and dairy at the same time,
Right.
ever.
But did you ask them to wait 6 hours till they eat dairy? No.
I just told them they can't eat it together at the same time. They can't have a glass of milk with them. But afterwards, I don't know, I gave it to them whenever they kind of wanted it. I didn't give it any thought. As they got older, on their own, they learned it in school. They knew to wait.
Right, but we're talking about...
To add one more thing, why would I ever ask a guy to cook me on Shabbos? Why can't the kid have a cold?
A what?
Why would I ever ask a guy to cook?
No, let's say a chole, the doctor says he has to eat, let's say, give me an example of something that...
Hot milk.
Hot milk, the doctor says that he needs hot meat. I don't know, any case where you need a hot cooked food.
I don't know. Once Alvin was really sick, the ambulance came and he said he has to eat now. So he goes, go downstairs and make him an egg omelet. So I went downstairs and I peeled the hard-boiled egg and I gave it with other things. But I mean, there was
had a hard-boiled egg in the fridge or something. But what if you didn't have it?
If I didn't, I would give him something else. Just because he made up he needs an egg, I could have given him another protein.
Right.
And the whole idea was
but just imagine there's nothing at all in the place where you are. You're in a hotel room, there's no food, the kitchen is closed. The only thing you could do is cook something that's raw and is unedible. Are you allowed to have a guy cook for a chole on Shabbos? This is a relevant question. Maybe it wasn't relevant in your lifetime, but trust me, the halach has to answer these questions. You following me? There's nothing to eat. You see, it's very hard for you because I understand I'm trying to teach the theoretical halacha so you understand the principles, because believe it or not, when you have to paskin for millions of people, all of these scenarios will eventually come to become real, even if you've never encountered them in your life. That's very hard for you. I understand. It's hard for you to understand that the way halacha has to be formulated has to take into consideration every theoretical possibility.
I mean, for a guy being in the house is a different story. But the whole thing, that means they would have to take the black on the top of the stove. They would have to move everything. I mean, it's like, I just cannot.
Okay. So what should I do now? Should I end this year or do we want to go on? I don't know. I feel like I'm a failure here.
I just want to obey him. Fascinating, I just find them fascinating. Right. I'm sorry.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I know exactly.
There are halachas that
she looks at the practical situation.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I, with the Gemara background, so I understand that they present cases to teach a principle.
Correct. The principles are so important. Because you can't.
I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I just can't see it. He has smicha. And when he was studying for the kashrus exam, I passed it. I mean, like, and I didn't know that. I mean, I knew what you said before. I knew, but okay. So I'm learning something.
Right. So in any event, a Chatan who has to eat is in a category of a chola. Okay, that's the principle. Accepted as an abstract legal principle. Okay. So now, what happens if a Chatan has a need to eat? And right now, all we have to offer him is milchiks, and he ate fleishiks within the last short amount of period of time. So the poskim say the following. Mi'ikar din, according to strict letter of the law, the katan is considered a chola, and you're allowed to feed him milchiks after fleishiks. However, we would like to make sure that at the barest minimum, he waits 1 hour. When he gets older, let's say a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, then we're going to try to train him to wait more hours gradually as he gets older and older. The source for this is in Masechta Yuma, and the Gemara wants to know whether the children have to fast on Yom Kippur. And the Gemara establishes principles. If he's at that age, let him wait. Instead of eating when he normally does at 9 in the morning, let him wait till 11 in the morning. Let him wait till 12 in the afternoon. As he grows older, we have him fast longer and longer until finally, when he reaches the age of what's called mufla samach le'ish, which is a very abstract concept, but basically it means the last year in a girl's life would be 11 before she becomes bat mitzvah. In a boy's life would mean 12 before he becomes bat mitzvah. At that year already, he should be fasting, if he can. A parallel halacha here applies to milk after meat. We're going to gradually, slowly introduce the katan to wait longer as he gets older. So it could very well be that if the child is 9 years old, we might have him wait 4 hours. Now, why is this so? Because children tend to eat more frequently than adults. Maybe because they go to sleep earlier, or maybe because of because of their state. And therefore, when we started with waiting from one Suda to the other, and you don't eat meat and milk in the same Suda, then for the child, the time period between one meal and another is less than 6 hours until he gets older. So that's going to be the gradual. Now here I want to mention a very interesting question of Avad Yosef. Can I give my child milchik chocolate before 6 hours? Again, if the child needs the chocolate, let's say it's a young child, fine, that's one thing. But if the child is already royal chinuch, he's old enough to understand the difference between meat and milk, okay, there's a need to feed him now a milchik meal, lamazag. But to feed him chocolates, why does he have to eat chocolates? Train him that he should wait to eat the chocolate until after 6 hours. Are you with me? So what basically Rav Avad Yosef is doing is he's making a conceptual distinction between what is litzorech and what's not litzorech. If it's physically necessary for his sustenance to eat a meal, that's one thing. That's called litzorech. And then we can play around with the 6 hours and less than 6 hours. But if on the other end, it's just a luxury item, it's just sweeties, as we say, sweets, then Rav Avad Yosef says you got to be very careful. Here's where you want to train the child to wait. Other poskim say no. If we're going to allow for the child to eat milchiks, then there's no limit. Throw in the candies as well. But I wanted to share with you another fascinating question of Rav Avad Yosef. I should have mentioned it before, but I'll mention it now. What happens if a person makes a bracha on a glass of milk, on a piece of cheese, and after he makes the bracha, again, you'll tell me it's not practical, but I'm telling you that
that's practical.
After he makes the bracha, he smacks himself on the head, and he says, you know what? I just ate meat 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. I forgot. Why is this a very interesting question? You'll tell me, well, he didn't wait 6 hours for sure. He can't eat the cheese.
Bracha
Can he-
levatala.
Excellent, because it'll be a bracha levatola. Says Rav Ovadia Yosef, if we have to weigh these two things on a scale, on the one hand, he's going to be violating our tradition of waiting 6 hours, but at the same time, if you don't let him eat the milchiks, the cheese, you're going to have a bracha levatola, which is
Well, I can't, that's Chef Cole, to eat something positive.
nothing is available. You see, you can't.
Oh,
You can't win this game. It can't be, right? It can't be.
Say nothing else was available.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, listen to Rav Ovadia's final conclusion. He says, let him take a little taste of the cheese. He's covered himself as far as bracha levatola is concerned, and then let him wait the next 3-4 hours as long as he has to. But that was fascinating to me, that in this, this balancing act, he felt that we have to tip the scale in front of the bracha levatola. We can't allow for bracha levatola because that would be a violation of a Torah law.
But the amount of dairy that you can eat after the meat, we're talking about a kazayah, no?
No, I think any amount. I don't think it's a din of kazayah.
Less than a kazayah.
Right. It's not halacha of achila. You need achila of kazayah. It's halacha that you can't have milchiks. On Shavuos, for example, we really have a serious problem because we want to eat our cheese balinces. That's based on a long tradition of minhag. But on the other hand, ein simcha levabasa, we have to eat a meat meal. So those who want to have both, what do?
Yeah.
So the answer is, if you eat the milchiks first, then you're allowed to eat meat afterwards. However, the poskim say that you're not allowed to eat meat and milk in the same meal, no matter in what sequence. The Gemara talks about eating milk after cheese or milk after a meat meal, and the Gemara says you have to wait from one suda to the next suda. But the Gemara would apply the same rule, the same principle, if you flip it around and you started by eating milchiks, because if you start with eating milchiks and then you eat meat in the same meal, that's already a mixture, so to speak, of meat and milk, and the Rabbanan made a hachaka that you shouldn't be eating meat and milk in the same meal. So some people have the minhag that after they eat the balinces, they make a bracha achrona, they walk around the block, and then they eat the meat meal. Okay, where are we up to now? Let me just see if we have a few more minutes. 5 more minutes, I'll keep.
Isn't it true that the meat meal, you can have a milkshake meal on lunch for lunch, and the evenings should be a meat meal? I mean, can't you just have a milkshake meal?
I think on Yontif, the main meal should be fleishiks. Again, if we were learning the laws of Yontif, we would have to study that. Both at night and the next day. You want to make sure that the main meals of the day are fleishiks.
But what about if you go to someone's house,
right,
and they serve a milkshake meal? Like if you go to
they serve a milchik meal.
Shavuos, let's just say they serve a full milkshake meal.
So when you get home, you should eat a meat meal. They didn't gain much then by going as a guest.
You mentioned once there are some people that hold when you have hard cheese.
Yeah, we're getting to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So before we get to hard cheese, I just want to show you a summary of what we learned until now on page 141 in the name of a sefer called V'achalta V'savata. And he says the following. You'll see he bolds it. Yeladim ktanim ad gil shalosh. Children up to the age of 3, nitan lahakil, lahafrid ben achilos lelo hefsek zman. Just make sure that they don't eat the milk together with the meat. End the meat meal, let them wash their hands, rinse out their mouth, and then you can feed them milchiks that are up to 3 years old. Yeladim b'nei chinuch, they reach the age of 4 or 5, then yesh lahakil lahamtin shah achas. We're going to ask that the child be trained to wait 1 hour after meat before eating milchiks. Imidubar b'achilas mamtakim. What about milchika chocolates? Roy lahachmir yoser. Okay, and here the child's parents have to see, they don't want to, disturb the child, make sure the child doesn't have any psychological problems afterwards, But under normal circumstances, try to avoid giving the child chocolates. Again, we're talking about milchika chocolates. Then finally, we get to the older age of children who are 9 years old, 10 years old, 11, 12. And then, nachon lahaskil lechancha lehamtin Kiminig beisam ok ma'at pachos mimenu lefi shikul das. Then we should already be training them to wait the full 6 hours. And now we turn. Oh, let me just mention quickly something about page 142. And then we will fast forward to the case of hard cheese, which is on page 158. So on 142, what about a case where I'm not sure if I waited 6 hours? What would you say intuitively?
Yeah, that does happen lots of times.
Well, this whole thing, I assume, is midrabanan. So
Correct.
Safek midrabanan.
Excellent. Safek Rabbanan Lakula. And yet, he quotes here on page 142, the Yad Yehuda, his name was Landau, and he writes that we cannot apply Safek Rabbanan Lakula in this case. Why not? This is called a davar sheyesh lo matirim. The Gemara has at the beginning of Beitza, if let's say an egg that was laid on Yontiv is muktzah, it's nolad, and it gets mixed up with other eggs, you're not allowed to eat the whole thing. What about bittul and what about safek d'Rabbanan? The answer is it's a davar sheyesh lo matirim. Tomorrow you could eat it. And here too, wait another hour to be absolutely certain that you waited a 6 hour. However, he quotes a sefer in the Sefer Kashrus, who paskins that, you know what? You don't have to go that far. If you want to be super duper pious, then wait till you're absolutely certain 6 hours pass by. But if you have a doubt, then, you know what? Yesh al mi l'smoch, we could fall back on the position of Safek d'Rabbanan l'chol. So what we're seeing here unfolding in front of our eyes are different levels. Do you follow what I'm saying by different levels? In other words, you could be makil, but you want to be machmir. If you want to make sure that everything's 100%, you're going to wait 6 hours, and you're going to make sure that you know that it was certainly 6 hours and so forth and so on.
Good question.
Yeah.
Go back there. I don't want you to feel that I'm being. If one rabbi at one time, whoever it may be, will say you don't have to wait 6 hours, you can just what? I'm just rinse your mouth and you could eat the other. And then another rabbi says you have to do this. And then another rabbi says none of these counts, you have to wait 6 hours. What makes that rabbi the one that we all follow?
How do we choose which rabbi to follow? Is that what you're asking?
Well, now nobody will. I mean, unless you're from Holland or unless you're German, most people wait 6 hours, okay? But like when this first came out, when these were what made the rabbi who picked the 6 hours win out? Do you understand what I mean?
So that has to do with what's called Azlin and Basaruba. What does that mean, Azlin and Basaruba? We try to get the sense of where the majority opinion lies. It's a very difficult, evaluation to make. I don't know, how I could, scan the entire world of all the rabbis in the world. But within a certain vicinity, within a certain locale, like I'll give you an example. When I was brought up, and again, you don't have to subscribe to this, we generally spoke to Rav Moshe Feinstein. That was the way I was brought up. When my father came to America, it wasn't like that at all. They went to a Rav Henkin, if you ever heard of him. And Rav Henkin was the final word. Rav Henkin died, and, there's a natural tendency to look for a replacement. And there was a general acceptance of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Sometimes it's because of the great scholarship of a rabbi. There could be metaphysical factors, other factors that we can't even weigh. It might have to do with even something like humility. But the bottom line is that a tradition of Psak evolves. It may take time. It might not happen overnight. When my father came to this country, to America, it was very difficult. There were communities where they didn't know what a shochet was, or even if they had a shochet, he was not reliable. My father's first position in Rabbanis is in Bangor, Maine. And he immediately, after he was 22 years old, he had just gotten smicha from Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. And he came to Bangor, Maine, and he found that there were two shoftim who were being machil nevelis and treifus to Klal Yisrael. Bangor, Maine, at that time, I'm going back 100 years, if my father's alive, it'd be 110. And at that time, a lot of the shechita came through Bangor, Maine. So there's major meat supplies coming through that area. And my father tried to fight against these two people. He tested them. He knew they didn't know anything. They were frauds. And this was the story of America. That's why, if you know, the America was called the Treifa Medina. Are you familiar with that phrase? And it was a Treifa Medina. My father can testify for that. And on Kol Nidra night, 2 years after he rabbinated in Bangor, Maine, he got up on Kol Nidra night, and he told the people that either these two shoftim leave Bangor or I'm leaving Bangor. Guess what? He had to leave Bangor. And I have a letter that was in my father's, after my father died, what do you call it? The Yerusha, I don't know what word you'd call it. And the letter is written by the so-called chief rabbi of Maine, of the state of Maine. He was in the, what was the capital city of Maine? Portland, Maine. And he writes to my father, "You're such a kanoi. Why did you do this? Could you imagine? For the chief rabbi of Maine. Kanoi. These people were giving us the veils and treifas. It was spreading out across America. Even my Rebbe, Rabbi Soloveitchik in Boston, had the same kind of problem." Okay, then I guess there's a shear going on now. So we'll talk about cheese another time, hard cheese, but I want to thank you for coming.
Okay,
Thank you.
And very good. Okay, it's good.
I guess I'll see you Friday.
Yeah, Mitzvah Hashem Friday.